Welcome back to reading number 3 from Building with Dust and Ashes by Kay Rose. She's just left her congregation, been excommunicated, and someone invited her into their apartment to live closer to her work. We are on page 66. Please remember to be aware of your state of mind while listening and seek help if you feel unsettled. October 2020. Jacob and I got married. I had picked out a date and had plans for a small wedding. A few weeks before the wedding, we married before a justice of the peace. We had a small reception then with friends and a bridal party on the day I had picked for the wedding. The photos of this event later brought me so much pain that I destroyed them. Upon Jacob's request, I quit my job. I was pregnant with twins then, but lost my 2 babies shortly after that. This was just the beginning of a very abusive relationship. According to Jacob, it was my fault when I lost the babies. If I wouldn't have stressed so much, if I had eaten better, or if I had tried to sleep better, they would have been okay. He wanted another baby right away. My doctor put me on birth control and advised me not to try to get pregnant for at least 6 months. I took care of Jacob's nephew and got a job again. This time I worked at a gas station in Thorpe. As the time went on, I got to know the police officers in Thorpe by name. They would come in for coffee and snacks. We would talk for a while when they came in, if they had time. Work was my safe place. I knew as long as I stayed surrounded by safe people, there was nothing Jacob would do to harm me. I did my best to support my husband, my nephew, and my brother-in-law. None of the grown men in the house had a job. Besides working a job and taking care of the baby nephew, I also cleaned the apartment building that we lived in, helping to lower our rent. November 2020. Thanksgiving was very dreary for me that year. There was no turkey, no sweet potatoes, no pumpkin pie. I don't even remember what we had. I remember it wasn't very much, and I didn't feel very thankful. I begged Jacob and his brother to find jobs. They made absolutely no effort to apply for jobs. Jacob did have a job when we first met, but quit it shortly after getting married. I decided to fill out an application for Jacob at a factory about 15 minutes from where we lived. The ad said this factory was in great need of help, so I assumed he would be getting hired within a week or 2. The end of November came, but he still hadn't received a call about an interview or anything like that. I was disappointed and rather desperate, so I suggested he call them. At first he refused, and said if they needed the help, they would have called him back. But after a lot of begging from me, he gave them a phone call. They said they'd been trying to get a hold of him, but had never reached a voicemail or spoken with him. He got the job and was able to start working almost right away. This was a massive relief to me, as I knew there was no way I could stay on top of all the bills working alone. His brother, however, didn't make any progress in the job hunt. It was very overwhelming to me having him live with us. We were renting a studio-type apartment. We had the one small bedroom off the kitchen. Jacob's brother and their little nephew slept in the living room off the kitchen. There were 3 adults and a child living in approximately 400 square feet of space. Jacob's brother was a spectator of our intimate life, and the thin walls allowed sounds to pass through. Jacob's brother, we'll call him Dan, wasn't in the mood to help. He did not contribute financially. We bought his cigarettes and everything for him. There were days and times that he was accommodating with the everyday chores. But then there were days and times that he just didn't care. Both of the men smoked. I hated this, but I couldn't do anything about it. One night I got home from work and smelled the strong smell of cigarettes when I entered the room. The place was trashed. I started cleaning, trying to determine just where the smell was coming from. And then I noticed it. Dan had been smoking in the living room. This was the last straw. Either Dan was moving out, or we were. Jacob didn't want to ask his brother to leave. I started looking for a new place. Jacob made it very clear that he would not ask his brother to move out, but that he was willing to move along with me. I found a place, and I began saving and planning for the security deposit and the first month's rent. I managed to save it and was excited about this move. I knew that if we'd ever have a family, that this more prominent place would provide the space and the privacy we needed to keep a healthier relationship between ourselves and to raise any children. January 2021. With Jacob's new job, we could move into a bigger, better place. The timing was perfect. I found out that I was pregnant less than a month after we moved. My emotions were up and down all over the place. I was thrilled, but in the same token, I was scared. Jacob was constantly angry and yelling over every little thing, such as if the dishes weren't done, if the food wasn't ready exactly when he wanted it to be, or if his favorite work clothes weren't washed and ready to go precisely when he wanted them. The list goes on. I didn't want to bring a child into this environment, but now I thought I had no choice. I was still working part-time at the gas station. Jacob's nephew had gone back to his mother. I was still working through my own court case that had forced me out of the my parents' home. There was still a lot of stress in my life, but I felt better prepared to have a baby now than when I had lost the twins. Still, our situation was not ideal. Jacob was thrilled that I was once again pregnant. It seemed to me that's all that he wanted. He almost instantly changed. He doted on me hand and foot. He cleaned, he cooked, and he did the laundry. I was thrilled with his change. I thought, maybe this will work. Warning signs of DV, short for domestic violence. There are many warning signs, but some that I now know that I should have been aware of beforehand are overpossessiveness, possessive toward my body, my time, my attention, and my money. Over the top jealousy, isolating me, blaming others for his problems and or his failures, having unrealistic expectations of life and of others that cannot be met, being disrespectful toward others. If you are in a relationship and see even one of the warning signs listed above, please tread lightly. A relationship can go wrong quickly if any of the signs affect your relationship. For example, if your partner, whether male or female, starts monitoring your phone usage, beware of what you might be getting into. My ex insisted on me having a joint Facebook account with him. This was his first step in playing with my emotions and thwarting my privacy. When everyone else is considered to be wrong and everyone else is to blame for all the bad things in someone's life, this is another big red flag. On page 77, you will see a power and control wheel diagram. This was developed as an adaptation to the original Duluth model. This adaptation of the original power and control wheel was provided to us by 180 and has been approved by the Domestic Abuse Intervention Programs. www.theduluthmodel.org. The Amish and Plain Community Power and Control Wheel. Physical coercion and threats. Physical violence and sexual violence. One part of this is coercion and threats. Making and or carrying out threats to take their own life or to hurt you or your loved ones. Or threatening to get you punished in the church by forcing you to do things the church would punish you for. using intimidation, making you afraid by using looks, actions, gestures, smashing things, destroying things in the house, harming your animals, displaying weapons, stalking you, or driving the horse and buggy recklessly with you in it. Saying things about you to church leadership or community members can be intimidation. Another spoke on the wheel is emotional abuse. This is putting you down, making you feel badly about yourself by calling you names, making you think you might be crazy, playing mind games, making you feel guilty, making you feel like a bad spouse, a bad parent, or a bad Christian. When they make you feel like you are not loved by Christ, or they make you feel like everything you do is a sin when you know it isn't. Another spoke of the wheel is using the community and the church to hurt you. This is speaking negatively about you, like getting the community or the church to side with them by telling others you are a liar, that you are not a good parent, that you are not a good spouse, or that you are not a good Christian. They might confess, but they do not change their behavior. They falsely use Scripture to justify hurting you. Economic abuse is making you ask them for money, giving you an allowance each week, or taking money you earn, not letting you know nor have access to the family income. Power and control might use children by making you feel guilty about the children, threatening the children, even beating or hitting them, and in any other way abusing the children. When they turn the children against you by having them convey messages and abuse to you. When they tell the children their parent is a bad Christian or a bad parent, or when they have the children report your quote-unquote bad behavior to the church authorities, leaders, I mean. Power and control minimizes, denies, and blames. Making light of the abuse and not taking your concerns about it seriously. Saying the abuse didn't happen. Saying you caused the abuse, that it was your fault. Or stating that the abuse was God's will. This is using your belief in God to somehow justify the abuse happening. The last spoke in this power and control wheel of abuse is isolation. This is controlling and limiting who you are allowed to interact with and for how long. controlling how you interact with God or the church, controlling where you are allowed to go, keeping you away from your friends and your family in order to control you. These are all parts and methods of abuse. You are allowed to report any of this to authorities, civil authorities. August 2021. We planned a short baby moon to New Jersey. It was an amazing time in my life. Even though I was tired and 7 months pregnant, I enjoyed almost every minute of it. It was a lot of driving, a lot of dining on expensive foods, and a lot of splurging. My favorite moment was walking along the crowded streets of Cape May, New Jersey. We stopped by a small restaurant and ordered food without looking at the prices. My plate of fried oysters was, so delicious. I will never forget the scent of the water or the beaches. I look back to this small part of my life with fondness. But as was common in my relationship then, I did what I was asked to do whenever I was asked to do it. After spending an entire day on my feet, we got back to our Airbnb. I was bleeding a bit, and I was low-key worried about the possibility of labor beginning. I took a shower and laid down. I was feeling both drained and happy. I went to sleep almost right away. I woke up to my ex behind me. My first instinct was to push him away. He took what he wanted, turned his back, and slept. I lay there, shaken and unsure what to do or say. It was after a couple of hours before I could fall asleep. The following hours of sleep were filled with nightmares of my teenage experiences. I woke up the next morning feeling as if I'd never be able to stop running from my past. While on our drive home, I got an email from my advocate at the district attorney's office saying that Irvin took a plea deal. If I was okay with it, they'd move ahead with sentencing at the end of August. He was pleading guilty to 1 count of disorderly conduct. He would be serving no jail time and was only being asked to pay a fine of $100. I was shocked. I felt devastated. Justice was not being served. But I also knew if I refused this and asked that we go to trial, there was a huge possibility that I'd not be able to attend a trial because of our baby's birth. If I could not show up at the trial, the charges would be dropped. So, I replied to the email accepting the deal to seek closure. August 24, 2021. Marathon County Courthouse. I attended the sentencing. I tried my best to prepare myself for this day. I didn't have a lot of time to prepare. I had written my statement months earlier. I read and reread it in hopes I'd be able to read it without incident. I was afraid I would cry. I was worried the defendant might bring many church people with him. I was scared I wouldn't be able to finish reading the statement aloud on my own. Upon arriving at the courthouse, I was greeted by several of my supporters, including a film producer from California. We went up the stairs to the second floor. I stood at the rail, looking down at security, watching the people come and go. I stood there watching until I saw Irvin Lead and his family with another man from the Mennonite church coming in. I was nervous and scared, but I was relieved that he didn't bring more people along. When it was time to share my victim impact statement, the ADA allowed me and an ex-Amish supporter with me to sit at the prosecutor's table. I was very nervous, and I felt thankful for the support offered by her presence next to me. I shared the statement in court and shared it a year later on social media. Now I share it here with you today. Your Honor, thank you for the opportunity to speak about how this crime has affected my life. I grew up in a Mennonite home in Athens, Wisconsin. From my earliest years, I was taught that a girl should dress modestly and be reserved around men. I also assumed men and boys within our church were safe and could be trusted. After all, our leaders were men, and they were supposed to be safe. I had read stories about abductions and sexual assault, but assumed that only happened in non-Mennonite settings. I had always felt safe. I realize now that I was too trusting. I felt safe when I took the job at the greenhouse, where I met the defendant. It was a business owned and operated by members of my church. Why should I not be safe? Within my first month working with the defendant, that trust was shattered at my feet. For the first time in my life, I didn't know whom I could trust. I didn't know what to do with feelings coursing through my body. I had no idea how to handle the emotions, and I didn't know how to express them. I panicked often and felt utterly alone. I hated going to church. I dreaded feeling alone, facing anyone. I couldn't stop wondering, what if they know about what he's doing? What if they would do the same things to me? How many people do this type of thing? I had the nightmares. I still have them. I started locking my bedroom door, afraid he would start coming at night. I would wake up at every little noise, usually crying, drenched in sweat and crying. I was tense all the time. I felt trapped. I panicked if I was in the church basement alone. I panicked if a guy was behind me at a checkout counter in the store. I panicked if a guy talked to me. I didn't trust anyone. I was scared to death. I was on the verge of falling apart. All the while I was trying to process this, I kept going back to the greenhouse to work. And the defendant kept getting bolder. I remember my chiropractor asking me what I was doing when my shoulders were so tight. I almost told her what was happening. But I kept hearing his words, "I'm going to kill myself." Because the defendant had told me, "If you leave or tell anyone, I'm going to kill myself." Every time I tried to sort through my feelings or the thoughts of telling someone, I heard those words. And I thought, if he kills himself, I will be a murderer and held responsible for someone's death. I tried to forget, but I battle with flashbacks and horrible headaches, which I have experienced every day since the assault. The defendant's sister walked in on him in the greenhouse, trying to assault me. She called me that evening and said, if girls would stay in their place, this type of thing wouldn't happen. She also told me I need to quit working at the greenhouse. I felt a flood of emotions, overwhelming relief to be out of the grip of someone who could toy with my emotions. I also felt horrible guilt. I thought all of it was my fault. I felt exposed, scared, and alone. I was sure now he was going to kill himself and that I was responsible. I waited anxiously for the family to speak out to blame me. Surely they would tell the bishop. That's the way it works in our church. The ministry finds out, they ask for a meeting, they do their investigation, and they believe whomever they want. Usually the person with the most powerful parents. They punish as they see fit, push it all under the rug, and forget that it happened. I was so scared. I did not want a meeting with the ministry. I knew my parents would be horrified once they found out. I hated myself. I turned 18. I had always looked forward to this birthday, but now I have come to dread it. I was afraid some man would ask me out on a date. Then what would I say? The last thing I needed was time alone with a man. As much as I hated men, I also hoped it might fix all of my problems. Maybe he would meet my needs and I wouldn't feel this way. Side note, outside of the statement, for my readers. Nationwide Mennonite teenagers need to be at least 18 years old before they may start dating. continuing the statement. Then I came up with a brilliant plan. I would jump out my bedroom window and end my misery. That way I would never have to tell the awful truth about my past. I would never have to have these awful emotions that I couldn't sort out. I would never need to worry about the church finding out. I wrote a note to my folks and told them I loved them. I told them it wasn't their fault. I told them not to ask any questions. I didn't want them finding the truth of what drove me to suicide. I didn't want them to know about the horrid details. That day, my sister and I had a conversation. I remember her telling me, "Whatever you do, don't try anything dumb." I remember staring at her, but once again my emotions were out of control. I remember thinking, I don't care, they don't care, the church doesn't care, no one wants me, no one loves me, they all hate me, I'm scared, I'm alone, no guy will ever want me. I'm scared, I'm scarred. I am only a victim. And those thoughts that I couldn't say out loud. I was sexually abused. I sat on the window ledge, dangling my feet, staring at the ground below. I heard my sister's voice again. Don't do anything dumb. Ringing in over the jumbled words. But then I would hear the other voice. If you tell, I'm going to kill myself. I'm going to hang myself in front of the church house. I screamed and threw myself over onto the bed beside the window. I cried and cried. I said out loud, I need help. I can't go on like this. I need to get rid of these memories. It's your fault. After that day, I threw every bit of strength into my work. I made friends with co-workers at the daycare and with the kids' parents. I pretended nothing was wrong. All the while I was losing weight. I wasn't sleeping well. I tried to tell myself I was doing better, but I really wasn't. I told myself, the less I have to do with church folks, the better, the sooner I will forget. But that didn't work. Every Sunday I went to church again. Every Sunday I would see the defendant and his family. Every Sunday I would remember. In March of 2019, I was listening to a friend pour her heart out about a similar situation. "You don't understand," she cried. I froze and whispered, "But I do." Then, for the first time, I told someone my story. I said it all. I talked about the crazy emotions and hating men, and at the same time wondering if a man would take care of my emotions. I talked about the intense fears I felt, the anger, and even the hatred. I told her about my fear of the church system. We understand each other. I was overwhelmed. I got off the phone crying and shaking. I had finally told someone. Suddenly, I felt very scared. yet I was relieved at the same time. I still felt scared that the church would find out, and what would they do or say? In my heart, I knew how it would play out. They would find out, take his side, and blame me. They would very likely excommunicate me. I still trusted one man who was ordained in the ministry, and thought maybe I could tell him. But first, I called an older friend from another state and told her about what I was going through. Instantly, she said, "This is a crime and it needs reported." No, I wanted to yell. No, no. If he finds out, Irvin is going to kill me and kill himself. No, I can't report it. I didn't know what to do. Why had I talked at all? Why did I need to go through this? My family has always been close, but as word about the assault got out, everything changed for us. My dad stood firmly by my side. My mom swayed drastically. She would believe me until the preacher's wife called her. Then she wouldn't believe me anymore. My oldest brother doesn't speak to me. He made the remark that I am no longer a part of the family. My sweet 5-year-old brother doesn't talk to me. Due to me speaking out, my parents have a strained relationship. Quite frankly, my family and community have shunned me ever since this came out. The friendship between my parents and the defendant's parents is ruined. I have no communication with my former youth group. I had to move out of my home and away from all that was familiar to me, away from those with whom I was closest. The church instantly took his side. It really didn't surprise me, but it hurt. The ministry called for members' meetings. This exposed me even more, sending my emotions into a whirlwind. I told myself that I can't face it anymore, anyone, ever again. I felt like the person in the ministry was discussing was not even me. I heard stories from what was being said at the men's meetings. I couldn't control the lies people said and heard about me. And I couldn't control what people believed. I felt terrible. I knew people believed it was my fault. I tried to tell myself I didn't care, but the whole thing was too real. For the first time, I was telling my story. For the first time, I had both those people who didn't believe me and those who did. None of the stories made any sense. I got a phone call from the ministry wanting meetings and more meetings. They wanted more details about the incident. I was not in the right state of mind to talk about all of it. I wanted to be heard and believed and left alone. But the ministry kept asking for meetings. At last, I got into the habit of calling law enforcement on my own to ask whether I should actually be having a meeting with the ministry. I tried to do what they advised, but I second-guessed every decision I made. I heard rumors that I was being resistant and about using the law to protect myself. One day, as I was trying to sort through my emotions, I wondered if I was hiding behind the law. I didn't know anymore. It's an awful feeling once you have to admit you don't know if you can trust your own instincts. But this time, I told myself, if I'm using the law to protect myself, and I need protected, then whose fault is that? Isn't it the fault of those who are accusing me about using the law to protect myself? At this point, no one was physically harming me, but emotionally they were tearing me apart. At last, I realized I needed to cut all ties with the church. This was very hard. I had spent the last 10 years of my life here. It's all I knew. But it wasn't a safe place anymore, so I withdrew my membership. However, withdrawing my membership wasn't good enough for them. They decided to excommunicate me anyway. They also continued to put pressure on my family. The simple fact that I drove my dad's car to Sheldon, Wisconsin on Sundays caused an uproar. They held men's meetings to criticize anyone who might be helping me. That's when I lost it. The church may take the man's side. They may blame me. They may tear down my friends. They may call the deputy a hothead. They may do what they want to me. But once they touch my family, I can't take it. It is not my family's fault that I am where I am today. It is not their fault that my life is scarred by the word sexual assault. None of this has anything to do with them. It hurt me to see them hurting, but I don't know what to do about it. While the crime itself was traumatic, I was unprepared for how much it would affect every aspect of me and of my family's lives. While the physical act from the crime might be healed, the psychological scars have left deep wounds that will stay with me forever. The defendant took away my innocence, threatened me, took my power, destroyed my sense of safety, destroyed my family, and destroyed my ability to trust. These are things neither the defendant nor the court can ever return to me. I will spend a lifetime finding them myself. Your Honor, if I may, I would like to address the defendant directly. Yes, you may. Irvin, never did I imagine that those months working in your parents' greenhouse would ruin my family's lives. Never did I imagine that what you did to me those months would impact the rest of my life. Never did I imagine it would come to this. Even though some of what you heard me say earlier was about emotional abuse from the church, I want you to know that I remember it all comes directly because of your choices years ago. I would not have needed to go through this. My family would not have needed to go through this if you didn't make the choices you made years ago. Do you realize how drastically you changed my life? Do you realize that for more than 2 years, you controlled my whole life? You controlled my emotions. You put fear in my heart. In a sense, you controlled my health. You controlled how I related to my friends and how much trust I could place in those whom I should have been able to trust fully. You caused me to second-guess all of my decisions. I say this in past tense, but it is still true all in the present tense today. I'm going to have to work on this for the rest of my life and find the true me, my emotions, and my voice. I am no longer controlled by you. I will be my own person, and I will speak from my heart. I also want to say to you that I do not have to forgive you, and I do not forgive you. I want you to know that I am in control of making the decisions, and my choice is not to forgive. Your Honor, I have asked myself many times if I would have spoken up, if I had known how much this would change my life. If I would have known how much it would affect my family, would I have done it? The answer is no. Maybe a year or 2 or even 5 or 10 years from now, my answer would change. But I lost more than I gained, and my answer is no. I trust someday I might look back and see it has been more than worth it. I want to say to all other victims out there, I know the message you received from the Athens Mennonite men's meetings. I know you follow the command to be silent. But I have another message for you. You have a voice. You have the right to speak up. You might lose everything, but you will find a sense of freedom. You will find people to stand with you and who support you. Speak out, even if it doesn't look in the beginning like it will help you heal. At the end of your journey, I pray we all will be thankful we spoke up. The cycles need to be broken. And so, Your Honor, that is where I am today. Living away from my family, being shunned by my family and community. I am sure everyone knows someone or more than one person who has a story of sexual assault, whether similar or maybe vastly different from mine. You will likely look at me and think that since I'm here speaking out, I must be okay. You may look at me and think I am okay while I work on my education, my career, and helping in my community. Remember that no one sees the nightmares. No one sees the terror that grips me when a man speaks to me. No one can see the fear that grips me when I hear another person telling about sexual assault. No one sees the headaches, nor the panic attacks I battle. No one sees the part of me that's not okay. You don't see that my emotions are still all over the place. Fear, relief, anger, guilt, mistrust, and yes, even hatred. I lost so much, and it could have been prevented. I repeat today, it could have been prevented. I want to add a note to any other survivor of childhood sexual assault, that even though I didn't feel as if it were worth reporting the crime at the time, it gave me a sense of freedom and power afterward that I had never felt before. It's definitely worth reporting. It's definitely worth finding your voice.